privy to that, and we do not want that on the recording. For one, so people can hear on the call, and two, so people who receive the recording so they can hear it later. I'm going to again thank you for being on the call. I know you have a busy day with your students, but I'm glad you took the opportunity to be on this call. Just a little context. The reason we're having this call is because we wanted to provide a question and answer session. Do me a favor, someone, everyone, put your computers on mute. Thank you. That helps a whole lot. We want to provide a Q&A session for the records retention and disposition schedule. This schedule comes out periodically every so often with updates. In the past, Wanda White, before she retired, she took the lead on this with the system office. She worked collaboratively with Courtney Bailey, who is the records analyst for the North Carolina Department of Natural and Cultural Resources. She is the one who put this together. And so because of all the questions we're getting, we thought it would be a good idea for her to come on and provide you the opportunity to ask questions about the retentions record. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Ms. Bailey to go ahead and take over. This is being recorded, so if you could put everything on mute. Ms. Bailey, here you go.
Thanks, Monty. So are my slides up on everybody's screen now?
Yes, we can see them.
Okay, excellent. So I do want to use most of this time to take your questions, but I wanted to sort of pre-answer some things that I thought might be questions, and then we'll see what I have overlooked. So like Monty said, my name is Courtney Bailey, and I work at the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources, and then the analyst assigned to the community college system. And in case you're wondering why my department is involved in this, there is a statute in the North Carolina General Statutes, the Archives and History Act, that says that our agency is responsible for conducting a records management program, and that we are supposed to advise agencies on the economical and efficient maintenance and preservation of public records, and that we're supposed to operate as state archives. So in these powers, nowhere does it say that we are the records police. We actually don't have enforcement authority, but we are the ones who sort of set the standard of what's supposed to be happening with your records. The other important thing to keep in mind in terms of the laws is the Public Records Act. So this is General Statute 132 that defines public records in the state of North Carolina. It defines it in a very broad fashion, and as you can see, I've highlighted there, it's regardless of physical form or characteristics. So that's kind of a catch-all. Despite the fact the General Assembly listed a lot of specific things, they also have that broad category. So if you look there at the end, anything that is made or received pursuant to law or ordinance and any connection with transaction of public business is a public record. So that means that the records we're handling in our jobs are public records, and that's why they are subject to this retention schedule. So in terms of why we care about our records, there are a number of ways that this might affect you in your day-to-day work. There could be public records request because, like I just talked about, these are public records that we're handling. They might be subject to litigation or to audits or to any other kinds of compliance efforts. And definitely good records management also helps you with your efficiency in your office. So there are a number of reasons why it's good to think about the records you have and make sure that you are handling them appropriately, keeping them as long as you're supposed to, but not keeping them longer than you're required to.
I'm sorry.
One other quick thing, obviously a lot of you probably handle student records, and so sometimes I get this question of, I deal only with confidential records, so therefore I don't have any public records. And so one thing I would clarify, and just a reminder, when you come in, if you will mute yourself, because I think when you come in with your mic hot. And we are recording this session. So even if you have confidential records, they still fall under that definition of public records in North Carolina. So I would argue that this is a better way to think of your records, that confidential records are a subset of public records. Obviously, the language is somewhat problematic there because the public does not necessarily have access to those confidential records. But like I said, they still fit that definition from General Statute 132. All right, so here's the meat of what we need to talk about today. Like Monty said, we recently updated the schedule, and you can find this on our website. The URL is here at the bottom, and I'll be happy to share these slides if anybody needs them. I think you maybe have already gotten it from the system office, though. But we group our UNC system and community college schedules together on this page. And here's what the content looks like. We have a little bit of explanatory material in the front and some helpful resources in the appendix. But here's the important part of it are these 11 sections to the retention schedule. So we sort of a combination of trying to think about who is handling the records. So based on what we've learned from the system office and from various people that have talked to us, we have a separate section for Con Ed records and curriculum and student services. But then some things are sort of based on the function of the records. So like personnel records obviously have to do with people who work for the colleges. So those are the sections that are in there. We do ask the college president to sign an acknowledgement of this schedule, and so you can find this these signature pages in the document that's posted on our website. And you could sign it electronically or sign it physically and scan it and send this page back to me, and that way it'll be easy to keep track of which colleges are up to date on their schedule. Here's what the schedule looks like then. If you have been using the schedule over the last 5 years or so, there's really no change to it. But in case you are new to it, let me just show you briefly that for each of these standards, we lay it out in this tabular format. So we have an item number just for ease of identification. We identify each record series and provide a title and also a brief description of what those records are. And then the disposition instructions are what tell you how to handle those records. You can see on this example, sometimes there will be things that need to be kept permanently. But there are definitely others that have maybe a 30-day retention or a 1-year retention or a 5-year retention. So there are lots of shorter time periods as well that are included in the schedule. The citation column then, I chose the first page here for this example, so it didn't have examples of citations. But generally speaking, if there are things that require a record to be created or maintained by the college, we list those as authorities in the citation column. If there are provisions that make some records confidential, we list that. And then there are sometimes that the retention itself is mandated somewhere either in the administrative code, in the general statutes, or in some sort of federal regulation. And so in those cases, we also list the retention in the citation column. If you get the schedule off our website, it's a PDF document, which means that it is searchable. So for instance, if you handle employee records and you have I-9 forms and didn't know what to do for them, you could search for that term in the schedule, and it would tell you that those are part of the employment eligibility verification records. Like Monty mentioned, we do update this schedule, not on necessarily a regular basis, but on an as-needed basis. And so if you recognize that there is a change that's needed to the schedule, there's a form that's included in the end of the schedule that's posted on our website. And you could request a schedule change. This could be if there is a new type of record that the college becomes responsible for, if there is a change to the retention period, like you become aware that the federal requirement has changed and you want to make sure that that's reflected in the schedule. For any of those sorts of reasons, you could complete this form and send it in to me, and we could make any necessary change. And for those of you who have been sort of keeping up with things, if you're most interested in what changed from the last time, so the last time we updated the schedule was 2019, there's a a post on our blog that lists all of the specific changes that occurred from that most recent schedule up to this one in 2021. And also on our blog, I put a post identifying specifically the types of records that you might be generating or accumulating because of COVID. So everything from, checklist for COVID symptoms or anything else. Tried to identify and point to where those things are located in the schedule for you, because the schedule itself is written in a way that it is not it's not going to mention COVID in there, but those records are covered. So I wanted to call those out and make sure that people can know how to handle those particular records. So if you have questions, once again, my name is Courtney Bailey. So here is my contact information along with that of all of my colleagues. And we do have a colleague who works out in the western part of the state in Asheville, as well as those of us who work in Raleigh. And you can see there the address of our website as well. I'd given you specific URLs before, but this is just to the General Archives website. So those are the sort of prefatory remarks I wanted to make. And now I'd be happy to take any questions that any of you have.
Courtney, one question we got, can we get a presentation, get the presentation emailed to us afterwards?
Sure. So what's the best way to handle that, Monty? Do you want people to write me individually, or you want me to send it to you and you broadcast it out?
Send it to me and I'll send it to everyone.
Okay, I'll be happy to do that.
Also, Dr. J.J. Evans has put a copy of the link to the records retention schedule on the system office website. He just texted me and said he updated that this morning. So there is an updated copy.
Okay, very good.
This recording, where would it be? I am going to have someone ask, where would this recording be available? I'm going to have Dr. Evans make it a YouTube recording if we can, and I will send it out to everyone also. Courtney, the question is, here's a question. Are there specific reasons or problems for not keeping records longer than stated in the schedule?
Right, so that's a good question. I mean, the way that it works in North Carolina, there is no penalty for keeping records longer. There are some states where you're required within like 6 months to destroy records that are eligible for destruction. In North Carolina, you have the discretion to keep it longer, but keep in mind there could be a different sort of cost of that. There could actually be a financial cost. So for instance, if you have to get warehouse space to store records in, or if you have to buy more servers for electronic records that you're keeping longer than is necessary, there could be that sort of financial cost. Also, any record that you have, if there is a request for it, be it the audit, litigation, public records request, you're required to produce those records, any record that you have. So even if you could have destroyed that record earlier, as soon as someone asks for it, then you cannot at that point destroy the record, even if it were eligible earlier. So that by no means am I encouraging people to ignore public records requests, but I don't want you to ignore the fact that you could create a situation where you have to produce more records than you might have had to otherwise. And then, for the efficiency reasons, certainly it's going to be easier to find stuff if you're only keeping what you are actually required to keep versus keeping everything.
Okay. Ms. Whitaker has a question.
I do, and it kind of sort of piggybacks on what was just explained. Just wanted to make sure at Forsyth, when we get supporting documentation for name changes and such as that, would it be okay if we simply look at the documentation that the student is providing, or is it that we should actually keep that documentation for said period of time to make sure that if a student comes back and says, well, no, I didn't ask that, we have documentation to show, yes, you requested us to change your name. Like for, let's say, folks who now they were married, they get a divorce, they then ask to take their maiden name back. I know in North Carolina, for the most part of it, unless you request to take the, unless you request to return to using your maiden name, that's not an automatic. So should we be keeping those documents to show at least that page to show that the student did request to take their maiden name back, or pitch copies, or they could bring in a marriage certificate, whatever the supporting documentation is that they bring in? Can we just eyeball it and then no longer have it for supporting documentation, or that's kind of on both sides? You can't have supporting documentation if you don't have it, but can we just look at it and then get rid of it, or just simply not take it?
So let me make sure I'm following your question. Are you saying that if I come in and say I want to change my name, then you're just going to immediately enter that into the system?
And see that, I'm so glad you asked your question like that, because sometimes it happens. And then other times we're too busy to do it immediately, which is why we require the supporting documentation so that we would have it when we go to do it. But so we don't always do it on the spot.
Okay. So it might be a two-part answer, and this is a good example of how, a reason why we give some discretion to the colleges. If you're finding that there are times where you need to go back and you do need that written documentation to justify what you've done, then that's definitely a good reason to hang on to it. On the other hand, if something we have some language about transitory records in the schedule that basically says if there is a document that's only used, its only purpose in life is to update information that is in an electronic system, then you would not be required to keep that form. And so that's why I was asking whether these things are done on the spot. So it's to be honest, a lot of times with records management, the answer is it depends. And so I'm afraid that your question may be one of those where the answer is it depends. If you don't find there are a lot of circumstances where you need to go back and provide justification for a name change, for instance, then maybe that's not something you need to hang on to for very long.
And that's what we were, because I have had to do that maybe twice, 3 times, but I've been around for a while and it's only been twice, 2 or 3 times. So that we just wanted to know if it was a requirement or if it's just local decision. And again, I kind of knew from being in multiple of these meetings that the real answer is it depends. So, okay, we will work it out on our end. Thank you.
Sure.
Courtney, Susan asked, can you go back one slide? I would like to, hold on, it went away. Let's see. She would like to see the difference between the change between updates.
Okay, so tell you what, let me, how about I grab that address and put it in the chat, because the slide isn't actually going to specify those. There were too many to put onto one slide, but there is a blog post that has all of that information that'll show what the changes were, and I just put that link into the chat.
Okay.
And then, like I said, I'll be happy to share these slides afterwards to you.
Okay. Hi said iPad's outcome measures reporting goes back 8 years. We have found that we need admissions documents and high school transcripts to be able to clear some of the errors during the reporting process and colleague data tail, but no longer have records, but have the record. Any additional advice? I'll read that if you need me to.
So hold on, I'm trying to go back. So the iPads is the integrated post-secondary education data system, right?
Yeah.
All right. So I mean, that's a situation, if I understand correctly, that those are reports that are sent to the federal government. So in a records management sense, they are the records custodian who needs to maintain that record. So that's why that's an example in the schedule of something that has a disposition of destroy an office when reference value ends. So let me go back though and see what the rest of that question was. Hold on, now my chat is disappearing on me. Oh, there it is. Years.
To read it again, we have found that we need admissions documents and high school transcripts to be able to clear some of the errors during the reporting process in colleague data tail, but no longer have the record.
So that's one. I don't know, Monty, if you have more expertise than I do in dealing with colleague and data tail. I don't know.
What I will say, if it's the issue of auditing, that this is something that Tammy Hill's group does not look at, this manual. So I know a lot of colleges plan their processes and procedures around what the auditors may say or do. And this is something I receive information from her that she does not look at this document when she's doing the auditing. So a lot of this is really pertaining to a lot of the federal and state records that are kept at the institution and may be reviewed on that basis. So if you have a grant per se, you need to keep your records based on what that grant proposal says, the amount of time you need to keep it for. And this records retention manual helps with that process. So the colleague piece may not pertain to this per se.
Yeah, so that may be another a local issue of if you have recognized their gaps and there are times when you need to go back and clean up data, that that's certainly a good reason to hang on to it.
Yeah.
Let me go back and catch one earlier question. There's a question about what is the deadline for submitting the acknowledgement approval by the president. Then there's not really a deadline per se. We certainly encourage you to get that approved as soon as possible, but there's not a specific deadline. But if you have a chance to look at that blog post and see, there are some things that are reflected in the schedule that are specific requirements in terms of retention. So we definitely want people to be following the most accurate schedule.
So, quite a quick question. What is an example of something you've seen where colleges, an institution or organization did not keep the records in the time frame which was required? And have you seen any case where there have been repercussions or any agency has looked at that other agency and say you should have kept these records?
That's a good question. I can't remember actually if this was for a college or not, but a few years ago there was a situation where a lot of agencies were destroying I-9 forms early, and actually Homeland Security reached out to us and said, can you please make sure people do this right? Because that's a situation where there were actually huge financial penalties on agencies who had destroyed those earlier than they were supposed to. So there can be those sorts of consequences if records management is not applied appropriately.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So I see a question here about discussing the process for allowing colleagues to scan and store records electronically and be able to shred the paper documents. So there is a form that's included in the schedule, and then there's also a sample electronic records policy that's available on our website. And actually, I'm sorry, the form is not in the schedule. Sometimes when I talk and look at the same time, I confuse myself. But at any rate, give me a second, and I will pull up that that URL for us. But basically, we have a sample policy that you can use for designing your electronic records policy, or you could use your own format if you want. But basically what we've done in the sample is to help you think through what are the things that you need to consider and include in your policy. And then once that policy is approved by my office, then you could use the form that I was talking about, which is an authorization to destroy paper records. And you can find both the policy and that form are on our website at the link I just posted to the chat. But basically that that form is one that then would be authorized on campus, would not need to be sent to my office, but instead could be handled on campus. And admittedly, having this two-step process does sound like extra work, and it is, but the reason why we make this requirement is that it should provide a level of protection to you, so that if somebody comes back and says, you know, I knew these paper records existed and now they're gone, what happened to them, or if there were an audit or litigation or anything else, and the paper records weren't there, that you would have an explanation and a justification that you are keeping those records and you have them electronically, and those electronic copies are the accurate copies of the original paper records.
Angela Murphy has a question.
Hi, I'm sorry. I just want to make sure that I heard that information correctly. So the authorization to destroy paper records, that form would be retained locally and does not need to come to you, as long as we know that we are securing those records electronically in the best practices for file naming and the file format guidelines. And we have ensured that we are retaining those records for the length of time needed electronically. You all do not need that signed form.
That is correct. Yeah, so that signed form does need to be retained on campus, like I said, in case there's ever a question about what happened to those paper records, but it does not have to be submitted to my office.
Thank you.
Sure.
Karen, you had a question?
Yes, thank you. Hi, Courtney. This is Karen Holding, Jordan at Wake Tech. You did an awesome training seminar for us some years back.
Yeah.
But my question, I'm going to dovetail back to you said that there was really no penalty for keeping records longer in North Carolina. And then going back to the lady from Forsyth Tech, she was talking about changing students' names and what type of documentation should we hold. And so in thinking about name changes, I'm also thinking about deceased students. So I'm wondering, I know it doesn't state, but name changes and deceased students, those are fairly rare in the grand scheme of things. I wonder if would there be a penalty, or would it be not good practice to more or less hold on to those types of items electronically, like in perpetuity, just to have a record to show that the college changed this person's name based upon request, based upon given the correct documentation to do that, and just to kind of protect ourselves in the event that somebody comes back to say that we were complicit in identity theft, right? So I'm, in my thinking, is more or less like holding on to certain documents in perpetuity. I mean, would that be a problem with respect to obituaries, deceasing the student's record, or marking the student's record deceased and changing a student's name? Because in our system, colleague, it doesn't hold on to the history of a name change. It'll hold on to the history of an address change, but not a name change.
That's interesting. Yeah, so one clarification to make about the whole scanning and destroying thing. If there are records that have already met their retention and you're keeping them just for reference value, then that would not require any sort of additional permission steps. So that would just be a local decision that, you know, we want to keep this longer than required, but we don't want to keep it on paper. We're going to scan it and keep it electronically. With that being said, once again, if somebody comes asking for those particular records, then you do have to produce them, like I said, even if you could have destroyed them earlier. But that's certainly a possibility.
Thank you.
Tammy Hill said, in reference to compliance reviews, State Board Code, hold on, I can't see. And could you please put your computer on mute? I can hear you talking in the background. Maybe they can't hear me.
When you get your first
I'm trying to see who's talking so I can mute them.
okay, so
But I'll move forward. In reference to compliance review, State Board Code requires the records we review to be maintained through the compliance review. We always coach colleges to refer to the retention and disposition manual schedule for further information.
And I'm sorry, Monty, I missed what the question was in there.
It was a statement. This is Tammy Hill. She's our auditor.
Oh, right.
It was mentioned. So she's talking about the compliance reviews that we do through the community college system. And she's saying in reference to compliance reviews, State Board Code requires the records we review, us, the community college system, to be maintained through the compliance review.
Okay.
We always coach colleges to refer to the retention and disposition manual or schedule for further information.
Okay.
Elizabeth Patterson asks, how long do colleges need to archive LMS courses, including the student work?
So that's a good question. So the way that we write the retention schedule, we write it in the sense that it's format neutral. So it doesn't matter if it's a paper record, if it's an electronic record that's housed on one computer, or if it's something that lives in the cloud, or if it's in a some kind of system like an LMS. So for that, you would look to what the particular type of record is. So you know, whether it's the student work aspect, if there is a class recording that has been uploaded to the LMS, if there's a syllabus. So it depends on what the particular type of record is that's in that LMS, and that can be found on the schedule, and the appropriate retention found that way.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Ashley said, as relates to Karen's at Wake Tech's question about name change, I thought that colleague retained the older names, maybe in bio, after the change is made in the system if you select other instead of birth. So I don't know. There's something you can answer. That's probably not anything you can answer. That's probably something that probably Sonia Bartley needs to answer. That's something they can send to her. She's our business analyst for colleague. And Gwen Whitaker said that it does. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Gwen.
Yeah, it does, and it is on bio. When you pull up a student, say I was Gwen Cook and I changed to Gwen Whitaker, it will pull up other names, other last names. So it does hold it. You just have to know where in the system it is holding it. I think it is bio.
If Susie agrees with you, she said yes, it's bio.
Good to know. So I see that there were a couple of follow-up questions on the electronic records policy. So before I forget, let me answer those. The policy itself is the only thing that needs to be approved by my office, and then the authorization to destroy paper records is the one that can be approved on campus. So I'm sharing that right now in case seeing that would help. So this is the one that you can find on our website on the higher ed records management URL that I shared in the chat a few minutes ago, and it will be all of this will be executed on campus. Does not need to be sent to the NCR.
Any other questions? I'm trying to keep my phone on mute because they're doing mooring outside. I do apologize.
Just to confirm, you said the electronic records policy has to be approved by your office, but the authorization to destroy does not.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Sure.
Michelle said on item 422, what is meant by hours of attendance?
I mean, that's the language that's been used in the schedule for a while. Sorry, somebody has a mic on and we're getting feedback, I think. So there, thank you. So the hours of attendance, I think, is just, you know, what I think it's another way of describing the course credits, in essence, that we were trying to use the different terms to mean the same things, I think. So for hours of attendance or credits or quality points received, those are all different ways of describing the same thing.
Okay, thanks.
So, and I think that that's more in a credit sense of hours, and Monty, by all means, jump in and correct me if I'm misinterpreting this, but I think that's more like credit hours than I was in class for an hour and a half on Tuesday night. So I think that's separate from like the specific class attendance.
And the question is, Richard asks, is it correct that community college attendance records need to be kept for 5 years?
Hold on, let me look this up. So the instructor's list of student attendance is can be destroyed after 3 years. And then let me see. And then also the registrar's list of the grades that are submitted. So that's not the attendance, that's the grades. Never mind. Sorry. So 3 years is the answer.
Okay, I'm trying to see if there's any other questions you have not answered. So far, I do not see any. Are there any more questions? Okay, I'm not seeing any. Ms. Bailey, is there anything else you want to express?
Well, the one thing I would add is I was reminded that I did a workshop at Wake Tech, and I've done some at other institutions before. So if it would be useful for me to do a workshop for your campus, I'm certainly happy to do that. And obviously in these days, it's going to be virtual instead of in person, but maybe at some point in the future, I could do an in-person one as well. So if you're interested in that, just reach out to me and we'll be happy to get something set up.
Okay. Well, Ms. Bailey, thank you for taking your time to go over this schedule and answer questions. We do appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. If you have any additional questions, just email me or Ms. Bailey. If you email me, I'll be sure to forward it to her. Again, this is not the same as information provided as for an audit through the community college system. If you have any audit questions, please forward those to Tammy Hill and she'll be glad to answer them for you. So thank you very much. You all have a nice day.
Thank you, Monty.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.